And I also want to touch on, since this is special on mental health, I want to touch on how you think mental health is related in the work you do as a filmmaker, as a creative.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think a lot of filmmakers go into film. I mean, number one, I think a lot of us go into it for validation, but I also think number two, we go into it because we're managing our own mental health through film. And I think that there's a lot of us have childhood trauma that we're just starting to really truly explore. And I think that filmmaking oftentimes is a way to understand all of that through making stories about like the things that have happened in our lives, whether it's like literally about our lives through a documentary, or you create a story that is like a sci-fi fantasy but still touches upon something that you've experienced. And so I think that like a lot of I would argue like a lot of filmmakers go into film and write stories because the process of making them is a way to manage their own mental health. Of course, like I think films and stories can't do all of that heavy lifting because sometimes you just need to go to a therapist or talk to somebody.
Definitely.
But I think that might partly explain why it's so gratifying for a lot of filmmakers to do this. And I do think that like part of why I enjoy film is because you are engaging in so many different art forms, like not just a visual art form, but also music and sound. You're writing characters that are based on the people of your life. And a lot of the times, those characters are either reflections of yourself projected onto them, or they're reflections of other people that you're seeking to understand. And a lot of people say that filmmaking is like the ultimate like empathy medium because it creates a space for you to understand yourself and others. And I
Hmm.
think that can be really soothing for your mental health, obviously. And I think also just like the act of watching films in and of itself, like is is a way for you to like sort of access your mental health. Like I watch a film almost every day, um, which is like hard to do when you have like a full-time job. But I think for me, it's just something that I seek because it calms me, and
Hmm.
it brings me like joy. Even if it's a horror film, I'm still like in love with it. And I also think like, particularly as like a Filipino American, I grew up. I was raised Catholic, was very hardcore Catholic, went to Catholic schools growing up. And I think that for us as Filipinos, we're used to managing our mental health through the lens of religion and our faith. And I think that there's a part of me that's still very spiritual, but there are some complex questions and emotions that you're dealing with that sometimes like it's beyond the scope of like what being in church can teach you. And I think that's when I started to shift towards film because it was my way of really accessing and understanding who I was in the world. And in some ways, like I remember being in med school and feeling like going to the movies and feeling like I was in church because it just felt like this was my space where I don't have to think about anything else. I can just focus on a screen and just have this experience and then leave feeling like I know a little bit more about the world and myself, and everything's okay, and these characters are flawed and I'm flawed, and we're all going through this journey where we're just trying to grow through our stuff. And like I think in many ways that's also a way for me to deal with mental health.